Welcome to the Mental Advantage Podcast. Whether you're an athlete trying to perform at your best when it counts the most, a coach or business leader trying to get more out of your team, or someone looking for more personal growth, this is the place for you. This podcast is your map to guide you to the right mindset, systems, and strategies you need to become the best version of yourself. And now, here's John Cullen and Brandon Allen.
All right, welcome into the show. Episode 99, Brandon. We are on the cusp of 100.
That's crazy. If you would have said, 3 years ago when we started this thing that we would get to this point, it's not shocking, but it is surprising, just with everything we have going on. And to be honest, we didn't know.
Right.
I mean,
if people were going to listen,
we could get 100 episodes worth of
material
and content and just all of it. I mean, it's wild. It's wild.
It's funny now though, because I do think that you reach a point in podcasts where I'm now getting emails where people are wanting to come on the show, like guests, or people are either pitching guests, or you have people who will reach out on behalf of themselves saying, "Hey, I've been listening to the show. I think I would be a good guest for the program." And so that's cool too, because I mean, look, we're always open to hearing really new, interesting takes on things, interesting stories, especially. There's some guests that we have coming up I'm really excited about, but we're actually going to, for episode 100, we are going to be, doing right back, all the way back to the beginning, right? Dave Meyer.
Turning the clock back.
Yeah, turning the clock back. Episode 1 was, Dave Meyer, and that was a really good episode. And at the time I remember we were like, wow, I can't believe he's going to come on the show. And it was because, I mean, this was like such a new thing. And that's why we always will have so much respect and admiration for Dave, because nobody knew. Like, I mean, it was just two schmucks that were like, hey, we're going to do a podcast. You want to come on the show? And he was so kind at the time to say, I'll go ahead and do this or whatever. And so I'll never forget that. And that's why when we discussed, who we would want to have on for episode 100, there was a lot of different things we could do, try and put together some compilation of things, have a bunch of different people back. But then in the end, we just decided, why don't we just go ahead and, kind of do episode 100 the way we started with episode 1.
Absolutely.
So tonight's guest, Austin Byler, who is the co-founder of Major League University. And what a great story. Speaking of great stories, I mean, Austin, somebody who played collegiate baseball at University of Nevada, gets drafted, goes and plays professional baseball, has some unique, interesting moments when he's a professional baseball player that he'll share on this episode, but is just doing amazing stuff right now as a mental performance coach, culture builder, working with athletes, working with coaches, working with the team as a whole, parents, whatever the case may be, and really putting a lot of those systems and strategies we talk about on a routine basis. He's putting those things into practice and helping these players get better.
Yeah, I mean, saw a need and experienced a need and decided to go out and create something to help young athletes. So it's fantastic.
He's and we've talked about this before, but every time we talk to these, whether it's a sports psychologist, mental performance coach, whatever the case may be, and ask them, why did you get, what prompted you to get into this? And the answer almost already is they are like, well, I needed something like this when I was coming up through. He says, I was a head case as an athlete, and so those are usually the ones who recognize, hey, I wish I had had somebody like this whenever I was coming in.
100%. 100%. And to his credit, and really, you look at somebody like Austin, and some of the other folks that we had as guests, these are driven individuals, right? I mean, these are people that are going to go out and make things happen. They're not sitting around waiting for life to kind of happen to them. They're going to go, charge full steam ahead. And, he's done a great job with Major League University and putting fantastic content out to all of his social media platforms. I mean, he's just doing a tremendous job for being such a young, young man. It's fantastic.
So where Brandon mentioned the social media content, you can find them at Major League University. You can find them on all social media platforms at Major League University, with the exception of Twitter, which is at Major University. So definitely do yourself a favor and do that. And then the other thing I would ask you all to do before we bring Austin on is, as we creep up on episode 100, if you've been one of those listeners from the beginning, whether you have been a listener from the beginning or you just started listening, we would love to hear from you for that 100th episode. So if you have any comments for the show, begging us not to do anything beyond episode 100, any of that stuff, definitely. Definitely reach out via email. Yeah, could you please? Stop. This is a good place to stop.
I mean, listen,
I beg you.
Yeah, you've done your job. I've suffered through 100 episodes. I am now mentally prepared. You can stop. Please stop.
Speaking of mental advantage, the only mental thing is that I'm mentally prepared. Like, this is what takes the new meaning to embrace the suck, I guess, for some of the listeners.
That's amazing.
So, but yeah,
that is awesome.
But no, seriously, if you guys have any comments, we'd love to, and we'll read some of those on episode 100. So without further ado, though, get your pen and paper ready, because here is Austin Byler. All right. Well, as you heard there from that great introduction, this is Austin Byler from Major League University. Austin, thank you so much for joining us. We really do appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule.
Yes, fellas. I'm excited to chop it up with you guys and fired up to be here. Thanks for having me. Absolutely,
man. Well, why don't we start here, Austin? Because I'm really intrigued with this. Is we have a lot of mental performance coaches, a lot of sports psychologists that come on the show, and you are a former professional player. You played at the professional level. Talk a little bit, if you would, just like take us back into maybe that your just athletic journey in general. How that went, maybe some of the steps along the way. And I'd really be curious about how you felt like you were as you reflect back on and in that mental game, right? In that mental aspect of it.
Well, in high school, I was a head case. I was an absolute head case. We tried everything in high school. My parents were incredible. I was super blessed with two amazing parents who raised us. And looking back on it, I have no idea how they handled and paid for half of what travel ball is today, and taking us to all these different places, Cooperstown and those types of tournaments. So thankful for them. That's for sure. They did so much for us just to be there. But in high school, I remember my head coach, it was probably sophomore, junior year, and he wanted me to try and catch because I'm a big left-handed hitter. And he said, if you could be a lefty hitter and a catcher,
there you go,
dude, you're going to U of A, like Arizona. I'm like, I'm going to Arizona. That's where I want to go. I'm playing the Pac-12. And so it lasted one bullpen. The first pitch, 85 off my knee. And he said, hey, okay, let's just stick to third and first base and we're good. But I remember he gave me this tool. He said, hey, you're going to count to 10 before you get back across the line. And so I was playing third base at the time, and I was supposed to count to 10 at any time that I felt frustrated, angry, upset, and it just wasn't working. And so I'd get to 10, then I would still be freaking out. I'd go inside the locker room, punch my hand, and the rest is history there. And so it kind of started there. I was a head case. Getting into college, I had another coach in summer ball. First year was decent there in college baseball, but in summer ball, it really hit me. The guy, his name's Aaron Nielsen. He's actually in Charleston, South Carolina. And he just brought so many awesome things. There's an outside the box thinker, just a really cool dude, a lot of good positive energy. And the other coach on the staff said, hey man, I'm done playing is about halfway through the summer. I'm having a great summer, but anytime I got out, I was so results based and oriented. And so anytime I get out, say, hey, if you don't go in there and calm down, I'm not going to allow you to go out to the field. And so I did one freak out, as I normally do, dropping a 4-letter word very loudly so everybody can hear in a 15 stand summer ball game. And so that happens. I sit, and that really just kind of hit me. I'm like, I need to learn how to handle my emotions here. Going in through sophomore through senior year, thankfully my senior year of college, we had a lot of different people come in between sports psychologists and culture builders and leadership experts and different people. And they just exposed me to this side of the game. I got really intrigued, and I knew I needed to work on it. I think we all do at all levels. Yeah. And that really got me into this side. Going into professional baseball, I got better at it. I was never great at it, right? And I think that's why I do this today, is knowing that I wish I had somebody there. At that time, we were just before mental performance coaches got on. I think they just hired their first one as I was leaving in 18. And we had an older dude, probably 75, 80 years old. The real therapy was go in, talk to the guy. It was really awkward. Nobody wanted to do it. And then he would give you pills. And that was it. That was like our deal. And so now it's a little more proactive and more efficient, but I knew I needed to talk to someone. I just didn't want to talk to anyone because I thought it was viewed as weakness, especially being a male in that type of environment with so many ego-driven people. And so that's really where we got into this, and where my passion formed. I knew at the end of 18, there needed to be some more people doing this out there. I didn't know where to go. So I figured, hey, let's just start a company and work out through mental performance mindset, team stuff, and just see where it leads and see what happens. And so that's how we kind of ended up here today.
So Austin, hearing that story, right? So obviously you're a competitor. You've got a fiery nature. John's heard me ask this question a lot because it's something that I know that I struggle with after talking with people and then trying to kind of be empathetic and put myself, like, I know how I was, and you and I probably share very similar personality as far as that goes. And I wonder how much of that, when you try to harness it, right? Like there's got to be some of that dog in you though, right? Like you've got to have some of that fire. Everything can't just be, lollipops and roses. You got to have a little bit of blood in your mouth. So how do you work on that today? And how do you teach to stay competitive, have that competitive nature, but also be under control?
Well, it's a great question. I think a couple things come with that is, one, I don't ever want an athlete to lose that competitive drive or fire, because that's what got most of us there in the first place, whether it was college baseball, professional, or just a good high school level athlete, regardless of the sport. You can't lose that competitive drive. But I think there's a line to walk as far as being very competitive and then allowing your results to dictate everything you do. And for me, earlier on in my career, the results were dictating everything. If I had a good game, I was awesome at home. Life was good. I'm high-fiving, go out with the boys. Everything is perfect. And like you said, kind of lollipops and rainbows. And then if I had a bad game, I'm in the hole, which I call my room, and I sit in there by myself and nobody wants to talk to me, and I don't want to text anyone, message anyone, and I just kind of shun myself away, just put myself in this box or closet, so say. And that was really where it started there. And so I think just teaching athletes to, hey, it's okay to fail. Like those things are going to happen. How do we learn through that? How do we find nuggets through failure that can help us develop that skill, that mental fortitude, and that grit that's going to allow you to be a great competitor? But don't lose the fire that got you there in the first place. Like, know who you are, know what you're working for, know the type of athlete and personality that you have, because that can be your advantage for a lot of people. You see some people like Ohtani, for instance, is so stoic, and you almost look like nothing bothers the guy. He's just kind of out there, it's kind of maybe the Japanese culture. And then you see other athletes, especially back in, say, 90s, early 2000s, who are just going to the walls and they're ready to brawl with anyone, but that's what allowed them to peak perform. And so every athlete's different. I think it's just getting the most out of your personality, but then harnessing in on your results will never dictate who you are or what you do outside of this game and what else that might bring.
Austin, it's one thing too, and I think that there's probably some ownership that every aspect of athletics could take in this idea why we are so results focused. I mean, there's definitely a piece that comes from the coaches, a piece that comes from the parents, a piece that comes from the players themselves, a piece that comes from social media. Like, there are so many things that are on these players today that drives this. I mean, Brandon's talking about, this was in the 90s when we played, and then, even later on in 2010 and beyond when you were playing. But the one thing, consistency has been, everything's always results focused, like you said, but I think it's even probably amped up another level or two recently, because everyone is putting so much on these kids to say, well, if you don't perform at this perfect game showcase, if you don't do, well on your travel team, if you aren't the stud on your, summer collegiate league or whatever, then you have no chance. Like that's the mindset, because I think social media has driven some of that too, where it's like everybody is like, oh, well, they only see the highlights, right? They're only seeing everybody at their best. And so therefore everybody else thinks, well, if I can't perform at that level, then I have no chance. And so now it's even further down the rabbit hole of like, I'm not succeeding, therefore I suck. And therefore this is, the worst thing ever.
Yes, there's a huge piece to that, especially through social media. And think of, even just us as adults, like we have our phones and we probably spend way too much time scrolling throughout the week, and we can find a lot of time to eliminate. At least I know I can. And for these kids, they really have no limits, right? They're still growing, they're learning, they're maturing, they're going through the different emotions and things that are happening just as you grow. And so think of a 13, 14, 15-year-old young athlete who wants to get to that level. The other day, for instance, I'm scrolling through Instagram and I'm seeing all these drills. And so if I'm a player at this point, I'm trying to put myself in player standpoint. I'm like, this drill looks good. I like that infield. This one looks cool. And next thing you know, I've probably looked at 30 different drills or videos of drills. And now I'm trying to think back and remember them. I can't remember them. I'm trying to write them down. Hey, I'll try this at our camp. Let's go get this Valley training glove. Let's go to all this other stuff. And I realized I'm forgetting the main thing, keeping the main thing the same thing. And that's exactly what Brandon said earlier. It's like, how do you be a competitor out there on that field? Like, regardless of the drills and the stuff that you're doing behind the scenes, like, how can you go out there and be a freaking competitor when you get the chance to compete? And I think social media drives a lot of that, which can cause a lot of mental chaos, right? Just clutter in our mind, focusing on the wrong things, seeing others as way better than us or more advanced. I saw an incoming eighth grader throwing like 86 to 91 or something. And I was just in awe. And if I'm 13, 14, my mind is, I'm never going to make it to the next level. This kid is so much more advanced, but odds are, who knows where that kid actually goes and ends up in 4 years once he's out of high school, which is incredible. But for all these kids, man, I see it, especially with a lot of the ones that we work with. And most of the time, their lack of confidence or their lack of consistency comes from focusing on the wrong things. And it's the social media, what other people are saying about them, and having too much information and not learning how to decipher through that. And so for athletes out there, I really think it's important for us to know yourself, know what helps you perform at a high level, and then pick and choose what things and drills and other ideas that you might have, and trust the coaches that you do have. And hopefully you have some good coaches, driving you there. But between that and all the tournaments and showcases and numbers and things that you see, it can be very results driven, which then leads to why we have a huge void in this mindset aspect of youth athletes.
So Austin, you touch on coaches, and you brought up your parents and how supportive they were and are, and it goes into this whole thing of the pressure, right? That we were kind of touching on, but the pressure that these kids are getting from parents and from coaches, and I think if I were in your shoes, it could create a challenge, right? Because you don't want to go behind a coach's back. You don't want to go behind a parent's back, but you also have to make sure that athlete knows that, hey, look, some of what you may be feeling is an external pressure point that, quite frankly, you're going to have to work that through with those people. Is that something that you also talk to them about? Is how do you handle that external pressure from mom or dad and a coach, where you can't, you have to walk a tight line, right? Because they're paying the bill. They want that athlete to get better, but they're also probably one of the reasons that the athlete needs to be, working with you. So how do you juggle that? Do you find that to be a challenge?
It's not really a challenge. For me, I'm always really honest with the family, the coach. Sometimes coaches will refer athletes over to us, and we'll talk on the phone and say, hey, where do you see him or her struggling or dealing with? And it could be a softball pitcher doing this. It could be a basketball player doing this. I mean, a bunch of different sports and athletes. So you get a wide variety. But usually I'll encourage the athlete to have those conversations. And they're tough conversations. They're difficult conversations. There's conversations that we don't always want to have. But for me, the best thing I ever did was have a conversation with my coach in college, which allowed me to play more mentally free and then have a much better season in final 3 years than the first year that I had in college. And so I'll encourage the athletes, hey, have those difficult conversations. And if it's extreme or too much, then there might be a different route or things. But you're spot on. A lot of the reason why we're seeing some of these athletes in the first place is due to the people who are sending them to us. And so nothing wrong with it, right? It's hard because some parents have never grown up in sports, so they have no idea what to expect. And it's this huge, crazy beast of a world, especially in travel sports, regardless of that sport. And so for us, if there's a conversation that's been had or a couple, great. Hopefully there's some solutions or resolution. Sometimes there's not. And so that's where, for me, I just act as, hey, I'm going to love them. I'm going to guide them. I'm going to help them the best that I can, whatever that might be, and give them my best input and experience. And hopefully they're mature enough to start hearing some different things. And maybe it clicks for them where it's, hey, this one thing I can build on and work with. I can take this nugget with me and allow it to help me on or off the field. So you see that a little bit. It's unfortunate when you see the family divide. I think that's the one that hurts me a little bit, because you'll see just kids resenting their parents for things that we really shouldn't resent them for, but it could be totally solved if you didn't think your 10-year-old was a big leaguer. Like, it's really that simple. Like, let the kid go play wiffle ball. Let him play in the backyard. I think, John, we were talking earlier, let the kids be kids. Like, you're in the summer, and I know, especially in the Midwest, but out where you guys live, I mean, where all of us live, is going nonstop all summer. And it's like, why don't you just go play your 3 to 5 tournaments and then take a week to go on vacation, or to just go be a kid and get in the pool and have fun with your friends in the neighborhood, throw water balloons at each other. Like, do something where you're still a kid and never lose that. And I think for us, we're almost forcing these kids to grow up and be college athletes at extremely young ages. And that's a dangerous territory to get in for their mental health.
I've never heard a parent say to me, hey, I really wish I had given done more tournaments. But I've heard them say plenty of times, I wish I had let them be a kid a little bit more, go on the to your point, the beach trips, and go to the pool and ride the bikes and all that stuff or whatever. But yet somewhere along the line, this became the narrative that you have to do this year round focus on whatever sport it is. And even it goes beyond sports. I mean, I'm seeing this, go into other school activities. If it's, theater, if it's like chorus, whatever the case would be, somewhere along the line, we have come up with this idea that you have to just consume every waking hour with that particular activity in order to be successful. And the three of us, I can tell you, I would guarantee, even without having discussed this with you, Austin, we're 3 people who just did a lot of different sports growing up. Just were always involved in a lot of different activities. I just realized, we mentioned it in the introduction, but we forgot to, talk to you a little bit about it, but tell everybody about Major League University, kind of how that got started. I think we kind of have a pretty good idea already early in this conversation, hearing your passion for this, but tell everybody about Major League University, what that is, and what's the main goal of your program.
Yeah. So Major League University, we're a mental performance and leadership training company. We'll work with individual athletes, one-on-one, small groups, as well as teams. And the teams can be, whether it's team building and culture related, it could be leadership related and mental performance, all kind of intertwined into a workshop. And so we'll do, whether it's one workshop with a program, 8 workshops, Zoom, in person. There's a lot of different varieties for those as well. Really the whole reason we got into it is through my own personal experiences and things in life, and on the field, off the field. I remember going into, it was draft year, my junior season in college, and just felt a lot of pressure. Really, it all started my sophomore year of college. I got hurt, and when I got hurt, I was having a great season, beating Aaron Judge in homers. I'm on the fast track, like Team USA opportunities, all this external stuff that really means nothing, but it was pretty cool when you're in it. Yeah. And that was my dream. I was like, I could go wear the USA colors, go be a part of Team USA, backup plans, Cape Cod League. I'm in the driver's seat to get drafted next year. And once I got hurt, I had a teammate right to my right in the dugout, and he had a big labrum surgery, and he's like, Byler, why don't you try one of these painkillers? And I said, sure. What's the worst that can happen? Nothing else working. I need to get on the field. Back to Brandon. I need to get on the field because I can't not be on the field. And once that happened, that one pill turned to thousands of pills, and it eventually turned to an addiction. And so I was addicted to prescription medication for about 5 years. Still performed extremely well. I have no idea how. I probably would have been better without it. I know I would have, but going through that experience, that was my exit. That was my escape. That was how I cleared my mind, and I meditated and all those types of things, was just use drugs to get away from what I was dealing with, like the stress and pressure of college and professional athletics. And so I failed the drug test in professional baseball. That really kind of woke me up to everything. Went on a downward spiral for about 1.5 years, and then found God and some great mentors and people in my life here locally in Phoenix who helped guide me through that next season into spring training. And I remember talking to my pastor, my buddy, and my best friends served with him at FCA. And he's like, dude, you're 4 for 52 right now in independent ball. You're done pretty much. And you said you're the happiest you've ever been. I was like, yes, because I'm no longer living and dying off of what I'm doing on that field anymore. Right. Like, I know I'm so much more and way more worthy. And I think in life and just in our world today, we have a lack of Christ in a lot of people and lack of faith, really, and whatever that might mean to someone. And so that's really where we developed this program and started to help athletes. And that's where I got the passion for it, knowing that if I could have had somebody there and listened to them and had someone pouring into me all the time, it would have made a wonder of difference. And it did once I opened my ears and opened my heart to them. So that's kind of how we got into this. And that's where we're headed here as well.
Amen. That's fantastic. Amazing. It's interesting. We just had Damon West on the show a couple of, I guess it would have been a couple shows ago. If you've not heard much about Damon or the coffee bean, definitely check that out, because it's definitely right along the line of your story there in journey. His is pretty extreme, but, one of the things he talked about is just that finding out what you were just talking about there, that when your label, your identity is external, and, all of a sudden now that's where a lot of danger comes into that, right? But as soon as it becomes internal, to your point, whether it's a strong faith or foundation and something that's deep within you, that's when it doesn't matter that, 4 for 52 all of a sudden becomes irrelevant, because you have a purpose that's greater than what we perceive to be our main purpose when we're that young athlete. So really good stuff there. So as you are, and I love one of the things, Austin, I loved about when I look at your all's website is you talk about being culture. I think it's like engineers, team culture, developers or whatever. That's something that's right up our alley. We love talking about culture here. Where have you guys seen the biggest opportunities as it relates to helping teams develop in that culture?
It's huge, right? I'm a big believer that culture either helps your team overperform or underperform. I've seen it firsthand and been amongst more, and it's unfortunate we still have plenty of places all over the world that don't get it yet. I don't know where the missing link is, but they just don't get it. Whatever. I won't get into that. But for us, it's getting the teams to communicate, and more importantly, getting the coaches to communicate with the players in a non-sport way. And so getting them to know each other. Hey, who are you? How many kids do you have? Where'd you grow up? You would be amazed at some of the things that you would just assume a team spending hours on end per week, 70, 80 hours together, would know about each other, and they just don't. And so having these conversations and more deeper than just how are you good? How are you good? And then we give the fake good and move on. It's who are you? What do you do? What's your purpose? Who's been a mentor of yours? Just asking thought-provoking questions and getting teams to communicate. The most impact I think that we've ever had is when I speak the less. And so it's pretty crazy to see that, because at first when we started this, it was go in 60-minute keynote. I need to be prepared. And I'm sure you guys have done some of these where you get 10 minutes in, you're like, oh boy, right. I got 45
Even
more
you're looking at your watch. Yeah.
I know, you're like, I'm just checking a text here, right? But I'm really nervous because I got 70 minutes to go, and it's that's impossible. And so it's really transformed, and through a really awesome dude, Dean Wellams, who runs Team Elite Performance, works with LSU baseball, all these incredible programs. And I've seen it firsthand with them and with other programs. He came in and did it with us in Nevada. And I just saw how it transformed our culture and our team. And it was you're in this moment in this workshop, and you almost forget where you're at, and you start to build these deeper bonds and connections with each other, which then helps you go out and play for each other instead of yourself. Mm-hmm. And then when teams do that, as you guys know, that's when you can become great as a team. And so that's where we've really seen the biggest impact there is with just getting teams to communicate. It's so simple, right? And some people are like, if you see it in a tweet, it's like, well, it can't be true. And it's like, no, like really the greatest things are the simplest little disciplines and simplest ingredients to make the best cakes. So that's kind of where we've been at with that. And it's fun to watch. It's fun to see it when the team gets it and grasp it, and the coaches grasp it too.
Well, and you nailed it. I mean, it's, how often we think as the leader in that situation, or that we have to be the one talking instead of, and we talk about this all the time. I mean, as coaches, and I want the coaches that are listening to the show, hear you say what you just said, is talking less is really, really important. Spend more time listening, especially in that early development of culture, is allow the players to interact and start to really, because they will show you, if you listen better and talk less, they will show you what they want the culture to be. And if you can hear from them what they want the culture to be, they're going to be more vested in it to begin with. They're going to have more ownership of it. So they're going to help develop that. So it's really, I think a key point that you just made is you started realizing when you were saying less, that was helping more. So it's a really key thing. Have you seen, and I asked this question a lot of mental performance coaches, have you seen certain consistencies, Austin, as it relates to some of the pain points of the athletes that you're dealing with? Are they usually, more consistently worried about confidence, more consistently worried about dealing with adversity, pressure situations? What has been your common thread there?
I would say dealing with stress, pressure that comes with just life in general. It doesn't have to be on the field. A lot of athletes deal with things off the field, much like coaches and regular human beings. And then confidence is a big one. I wouldn't even say lack of confidence, it's more of inconsistencies in confidence due to being so results driven. And I think part of that society, part of it's all this new stuff with AI and things that you can just get done overnight pretty much for you. It's pretty incredible. But with that, it has all this information coming at our athletes, and they don't know how to funnel through a lot of this. And so those are kind of the three main pain points, I would say, and they all go together. And in my opinion, they all stem from something deeper. Maybe it was something in 12U. Maybe it was something in college where the coach said something and you just clinged on to it and remembered it and you couldn't let it go for the rest of that season. And it just ruined your outings, right? You didn't get much outings because it ruined it. And so I see that a lot with a lot of the athletes that we work with. And so my job and my role is to just give them little simple things that they can do consistently over time to help build more productive habits in their life. And ideally that helps have things that they can trust and believe in. And regardless of what it might look like you said, when your faith is strong, or whatever it might be in, a lot of the results become irrelevant. And so when you said that right there, it's like, I can win a championship, lose a championship. Obviously we all want to win, but at the end of the day, that doesn't define me. And so if I know that, if I can relate to that and attach myself to that, not the result, it allows me to free myself up and ultimately play better. And so we're seeing a ton of that with the athletes that we work with, and all from young ages all the way up through college and professional baseball. And it's crazy to see it when you see an athlete reach out who you see on TV or you see in the cultural series, and you're like, oh my gosh, that guy's a beast, right? Or she's amazing at what she does. And they still struggle with things, right? It's like, we're all human, and it looks good out there. Like you said, the highlight reel on social media, but in all honesty, there's some deeper things that we all deal with. And so for that, I think that's where it's just addressing those and giving athletes some consistencies, some routines, some stuff that they can do over and over and over that sometimes might be mundane, but it keeps them focused. It keeps them in line with where they're trying to go and their goals.
It is amazing when you sit back and what you just said, Austin, where you see how these athletes can perform even with the baggage that they're having to, compartmentalize and say, okay, well, for these 3 or 4 hours, I'm going to push this back here. But then when I get off, it's going to come back to the forefront, right? And it's stuff that I've got to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Going back to the culture thing, though, I am curious. So, do you find it more difficult in today's environment? Because I still coach. We talk about culture a lot, accountability a lot. And I find accountability to be something very challenging for a young athlete now, because again, if you look the whole social media thing and everybody wants likes and everybody wants, followers and this, that, and the other. And at times it can be very difficult for those athletes to speak up because they just don't make that real connection anymore because they're always on the phone or whatever. Accountability for me is one of those things that I see a struggle. And do you guys address that, or how do you address it? Can you give us some insight there?
Yeah, there's a huge void in accountability, and a lot of it's self-accountability. And so you'll see it with some programs. And normally if we get asked to come in and work with a team or a program, they usually get it. The coach is usually on board with this type of stuff and is more progressive in their thinking, and they want they want their voice reinforced, right? That's why they're bringing you in usually. And so you don't see it a ton with certain programs, but what I'm finding with the teams that win consistently, whether it's high school level, travel ball level, college level, and even professional level or business, are the teams that hold each other accountable and themselves accountable. It's so simple, but they're really good at the little things. And it's like the John Wooden stuff. Like they're tying their shoe and they get it on and they step on the court. Well, now I'm never going to have my shoe fall off. So now I never lose a flat tire, and that might win or lose me a game. But it was so basic that most people overlook it. And accountability is one of those things. One of the things that we've done to address it is develop accountability partners with teams. Now, it can go one of two ways. It can be really beneficial and helpful if you have a mature team. If you're in high school and there's some teams that are kids who are just younger and maybe immature, they use that as, like, for lack of better terms, BS hour, for 2 minutes or 3 minutes to just, what do you do? Like, just stupid jokes that are totally immature. But I think COVID did a lot of that too for a lot of our kids. And I do a lot of speaking in high schools. And so we do this big program. There's 200 to 250 kids at once in the gymnasium, 6, 7, 8 hour days. And it's just it's a long day, right? For that many kids at that level. And they're all different backgrounds and not all athletes, really minimal athletes. So you don't even get kids who are in it. But for them, I think a lot of it is getting them to communicate with each other more often. But you're seeing just a lot of kids who have missed that social connection with people due to what's happened the last few years and being pushed online and to Zoom and to all these things and Snapchat and all that type of stuff. My good buddy says, you got a Snapchat mind. It's like you see it and it's gone. It's like, man, that's so good, because we all kind of do. It's like we see it and then say, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? Who's snapping? Who's this? And so, I deleted it. I don't like that. It's terrible. It's brutal. But for all our kids, they got it, right? And we got to just be honest with ourselves. What are these kids using all the time? And so that's a big piece there. And so just getting them to communicate. So accountability partners have been decent, and then laying the foundation over and over and over and having people who can reinforce your voice, I believe at least helps hopefully start to anchor that in. And everybody's different, right? Some kids are going to buy it, some won't. But from the teams that we see that are just consistently at the top and whatever it might be, they're just really good at having, holding each other accountable and having player-led cultures, right? And I think part of that's from the culture that you kind of foster as a coach. But that's just, for me at least, that's the most successful teams that we've seen personally, for sure.
And when you see it, you know it. Like it's very easily recognizable. You understand that, when you see great teams with great culture that hold each other accountable, have a standard in place that everybody's going to live up to. But I also think, Austin, and Brandon's heard me say this before, is I think there's become this negative connotation with accountability. It's this idea that it's always about catching somebody doing it wrong. But the reality of it is, holding somebody accountable is saying, I can also catch you doing it right. I can reward the behavior I wish to see repeated. And when I see it as a coach, when I see it as a parent, then I'm going to acknowledge that. I'm going to hold you accountable. So that's really important as a parent or a coach that's listening, is to understand, have a very, frank conversation with your players or with your kids and say, I'm going to set a standard. I'm going to hold you accountable, which means I will sometimes be catching you in a situation or observing maybe you not living up to that standard. And when I do, understand that if I get on you, it's always about the performance. It's not about the performer. It's not personal. It's about a behavior that I'm seeing you do that is not consistent with the standard that you and I both agreed on. And then it also becomes, there's also going to be plenty of times where I'm holding you accountable for doing it right. I'm telling you, hey, this was a great job. I love the way that you studied an extra hour for that test that you had because you knew how big of a test that was at the end of the week, or whatever the case may be. But I think we can, as coaches, as leaders, as parents, also really make sure, reframe, if you will, the way that we look at accountability. And it's not just this negative connotation that we've, seem to think it is.
That's really good. I love the praise. It's like, man, let's find ways to praise our guys and girls too, whoever we're coaching. Let's find more ways to praise them versus like, I'm always finding doing the wrong thing. And eventually that voice is like, okay, here's coach again. It's like, no, hey, I saw you go pick up those balls and everybody else left. You stayed here. You picked up each one. You didn't even hit. That was freaking awesome, dude. Give me some nucks. And then it's like, you see this joy go out. It's like, oh my gosh, somebody recognized me for something good.
Absolutely.
Like, it's all simple things. And I wish more people would like just understand it, but I guess that's why you see teams that overperform and teams that underperform consistently.
They struggle with it. And look, and listeners, do yourself a favor, follow Austin and the folks with Major League University on Instagram. There's a lot of different places. Austin, I know on Instagram, it's at Major League University, all one word together. Is that consistent with like Twitter and other places that they can find you?
Everywhere except for Twitter. Twitter is at Major University. I don't know what happened with the league. They didn't let us. So, that was a 4 or 5 year ago thing. And I'm still a little sad, bitter, frustrated.
Well, it's going to be gone after Thursday anyhow. So
true.
That's right. No, but the reason I bring that up is because one of the things and I think you have such good content on there, but one of the things that really struck me as we're talking about that external talk that we all hear as players, as kids, that everybody is listening to. It's also that self-talk. It's that really how important it is to have positive self-talk. And one of the things I loved, and as you can imagine, as we're coming up on episode 100, Brandon and I have heard just about every way you can reframe a particular philosophy or thought and the way it's described. But you actually had a unique way when you talked about breathe air in dealing with self-talk. And if you don't remember it, I have, because I think it was a little bit later on, but it was that A was acceptance and that acknowledgement of the thought. E was, or I'm sorry, not E, G. So now I can't even spell air. I was intercept, and then R was release it. So talk to us a little bit about that, if you would, because I thought that was a really good way of like, hey, once I'm seeing or understanding that I'm having these negative self-talk moments, I need to take some action on it, right?
Yes. No, and there's so many ways to do it. And I love the John Gordon deal too. I heard this a long time ago, and who knows who started this way back when, but it's to talk to yourself more than you listen to yourself. I always just love that one, and of just like speaking life into yourself, right? Let me just praise myself a little bit, not like be too ego with it, but just give myself some love every once in a while. Breathe air. The reason I like that is, number one, we're huge on the breathing, and you always hear to breathe. And we all know that breathing can help. There's so many scientific studies out there that show the studies, I guess, for why that's important for us. But for us, it's like, man, what makes sense, and what can be almost an analogy or an acronym that can help an athlete understand this. And so breathe air with, like you said, acceptance and acknowledgement. Number one, I've got to acknowledge it. And I remember hearing that on a podcast a long time ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago, early morning driving. And I just had a podcast on, and they said, hey, the first step is acknowledgement. Like, you've got to acknowledge what's going on. If you never acknowledge the issue, you can never solve the issue, whether it's business or yourself personally. You got to acknowledge it and accept it first. Okay, cool. So I had that. I'm like, okay, that's good. And then the I used to be, I don't even remember what it was. I don't even remember, but now it's intercept. And the reason I like intercept is I think of football. And so when I think of football players, you're a DB and you're scanning the field and you pick it off. Like, I'm intercepting the football as a negative thought. I'm intercepting the negative thought, and I'm running it the other way. Like, I'm going to pick it off. It's over with. I've noticed it. I've acknowledged it and accepted it. Like, I'm having this thought. Like, I'm not superhuman where I don't have these. We all have these types of things, it says in the word. And so I pick it off and I start running the other way with it, because I don't want it in my house. I don't want it with me. I don't need it there. It's not on my team. We're taking this thing the other way so that I can score a touchdown or get victory. And that's the reset or replace. And that's resetting or replacing it with something more serving. And so we talk about a couple different cues: physical cues, something that I can physically do to reset my mind or reset my performance. Visual cues, something that I can visually look at, whether it's the bat or something on football, maybe a goalpost, something that you can find there. And then verbal cue, which is just my self-talk, right? What I'm telling to myself. And so giving it that way to an athlete, to where it's like, oh, if I have a negative thought, I'm just going to go intercept it. Like, that makes so much more sense than going through these insane scientific studies that they're like, oh, that sounds great. It's really cool. But guess what? What am I supposed to do here again? Right. And I think that's where we get in trouble is, as coaches, right? We all have the flaw of this sometimes, of talking way too much and just almost verbally vomiting on our athletes. and they're taking nothing out of the message, when we can keep it really simple with something like that, to where, hey man, you got a negative thought, intercept that. You're feeling down today, cool, intercept it. Let's run the other way. Let's see what we can do to stack some positives in our favor here the rest of the day, or the rest of practice, the rest of this game, whatever it is that's happening in life, in school, especially in school. A lot of these athletes, especially the ones who go to very highly demanding academic schools, or I used to live in the Bay Area in California, up in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, and it's a different beast up there. I mean, it's one, to afford to live up there. Number two, just the amount of pressure on these kids academically to get 4.5s and all this insane stuff to move on. And I think for them, if we can just keep it in very simple terms, they're going to relate and they're going to get it. And I'm a big believer that simplicity is the key to everything. And so if we can keep it simple, they're going to understand it. They win, we win, our team wins, and everybody hopefully can perform at a higher level.
Yeah, it's I want the listeners to understand this piece of that is when I was kind of coming up through and doing some of the mental performance training, I initially did, we learned recognize, release, and refocus. And one of the keys there, and I want coaches and parents to hear this, is that physical and visual is why that's so important, is it gets your mind thinking of something else. Like you have to, in order, if I'm looking at the barrel of the bat, for example, if I've picked out a sign on the outfield wall, or I'm doing something, or I'm taking my batting glove off and putting it back on, like that, now that I've recognized, or and you're, acknowledged and aware of it. And then you, like you said, done the interception part, doing something that will allow me to now refocus on something else, because otherwise it's very easy to allow that to creep back in. I can try and intercept it, but then how quickly, especially if I just struck out in a big situation, or I made an error in a big situation, how easy it is for that to creep back in. But if I pick something out visually, or to your point, physically, I do something that now my mind can't focus on two different things at the same time. So if I'm doing that, I can't be focused back on that error or something I just made. So really good stuff there that you just unpacked. I know in talking to you earlier, I told you that Brandon will be so excited to hear this next topic that we're going to bring up, which is just that importance of, kind of meditation and cold plunges and cold baths. And we were talking about that earlier, how, all of these things, these systems, the strategies, different things you can do to kind of get yourself in a better frame of mind, a better mind space. Would you just kind of unpack a little bit about that? You were saying that's something that you have really been digging into a little bit more, is like to just that, whether it's a gratitude journal or something, and then mixed in with that cold plunge.
Yes. So a couple of things with that. The cold plunge, life-changing, Brand. Let's freaking go, baby. Let's go.
100%.
So
100. I mean, it's 6 weeks, and it's shock. I mean, it's both physically shocking, but not like having done it now consistently, it is a wonder to me how big of a change that creates on a daily basis for me. 100%.
Yes.
100%.
It's the greatest thing of all time. I mean, there's a lot of good things actually, so I can't say the greatest, but it's up there with the greats, right? That is amazing, but it's just a simple, same thing, a daily discipline. And so how I look at, I'll start with the gratitude journal. For me, when I started to get out of my mental funk and just try and find more positivity, and I was always a really positive dude, high energy. I was just battling those demons that were holding me back from who I really knew I could be and who I wanted to be. And I started with gratitude. I heard it on some podcasts, and I was like, you know what? I've heard it so many times and read it in these books. Somebody, like, not all these people are lying. Somebody's got to be doing something right. And so I started to write down 3 things I'm grateful for every day. It led to 5. It led to 10. Then I was like, okay, well, I'm not big on sitting there and writing all the time. For me, it should be a focus thing. I should probably be better at it, but I like to go on walks now when it's 1:16 outside. Yeah. I still go on walks because I don't care. I'm like, I'm going to go on at least a 10-minute walk, not a 30-minute walk here, and just either pray or say the things that I'm grateful for. Man, I'm so grateful for this place, even though it's freaking a concrete jungle out here sometimes. It's so hot, and just seeing different places and getting to travel. I'm very grateful for those experiences. And most of it all started through baseball. Yeah. And so gratitude's been a huge piece. It's so simple, but it just produces more of those positive emotions we want to feel. The cold plunge and cold tub is life changing. And so I finally found, I was telling John this, I finally found a place in Phoenix it's a gym who has the cold tubs. I don't have to go buy one. I want to buy one. I'm close to buying one. I'm going to buy one when we move and all that stuff. But for now, I get to go to this gym and it's all controlled. It's there. It's all set up for me. It's just huge. I don't have to go get ice. I don't have to do any of that stuff. It's just there. And so now after my workouts, I'll get in the cold plunge after I hit the sauna. And I'm just a huge believer in those types of things, man. It's changed 100%. How I think. It changed my mindset. The biggest piece for me, though, is the breathing. It's right when you step in, your mind tells you all the things that you don't want to do. This is so cold. It's colder than it's ever been today. Why are you getting in? Go sit in the hot tub right next to you where there's 15 people in and there's nobody in the cold plunge for a reason.
Right. There's a reason. Yeah.
I know. And it's like, so when I get in there, man, I sharpen my focus. And so when it's cold here in the winter, my parents have a pool. I'll go over there and we'll sit in the hot tub and then I'll jump in the cold and it'll actually feel cold for once. But right now, obviously there's no cold water coming through our pipes. So this is a huge game changer, having a place to do it. And I just control my breathing, and it's like my whole body goes into shock. Kind of like you said, Brandon, like my body's really shaking, but I've got to slow my breath down. I've got to focus on something. And I've noticed, especially even today, it's like when somebody else tries to get in or there's people walking around, my focus starts to drift away, and I've got to really harness it back in. And I had the thought, I'm like, man, I don't like when people get in that plunge with me. So I try to get in there when nobody's in there. But now I'm like, you know what? That's actually a good distraction, because my mind wants to wander to that and go, man, it's so cold. I'll get out when they get out. They only lasted 2 minutes. Like 2 minutes is enough, but it's like after 2 minutes, you're numb. And so it's like, why not stay in for another 3 or 4 or 5 or 10? So I've noticed so many, not only physical changes, mental changes, more importantly, consistency with it. And every morning, even if it's not super cold, some days, some places are different than others. I always rip the cold shower right away, because it just kind of sparks my mind, tells my body that, hey, I'm in command of you. Like, I get to tell you when we go, and right now we get to go. It might be 8 a.m. It might be 5 a.m. I don't care what time, even 3 a.m. flight, but I'm going to step in. And when that thing hits my face, it's like I had the best night of sleep. It's crazy the difference it's made. It's amazing.
It is. It is. When you're ready to buy one, I have one right outside the door right here. I did all kinds of research. Let's talk. But it is amazing. And one of the things that not only what I'm hearing and what you and I have experienced through the cold plunge, but also what I'm hearing too is, regardless of what it is, it's focusing on right here and now and being present, right? I mean, that at the end of it, if I struck out 4 times, if I made an error, I don't get any of that back. So let's be present on what I need to do right now and accomplish right now. If you step into that cold plunge, and John laughs, and he rightfully so. If there's like I've got a sauna, I have the cold plunge. I mean, if there's a gadget that is anywhere I mean, I wear the Whoop strap, just all of it. It is by far my weakness, but at the end of the day, that data helps you focus on the things that need to be improved. But it also touches on something that both of y'all mentioned earlier, which is it also shows me the places that I have improved and where I have maybe excelled for the day, right? So, every time you get out of that cold plunge, there is a sense of accomplishment. And like you said, Austin, like, getting the day started that way. And it's like we heard from, the admiral that did the commencement speech. Make your bed. Like it's
right.
It's the little things. And you talked about it earlier, Austin, about just stacking, right? Like let's stack some small little wins. And the next thing you know, you've accomplished a lot more than you thought you would in a day. And it's not even lunchtime yet. Right. So, I mean, those are important things. And I think it's important for the listeners to understand, don't devalue a little win because you think, it's not a big deal. Everything's a big deal. If you show up to the gym, it's a big deal, because you know what? 90% of the other folks that did not. Right. I mean, it's just give yourself credit and grace where you need and deserve to have those things from a self-healing and place in your life that you can go, you know what? I did this today. I'm proud of myself today. I think a lot of times we don't allow that to just sit back and go, you know what? Like, you're kind of a savage, man. Like, good for you. Right. And that's okay to do that.
Well, yes. That's finding those moments of gratefulness too. Like Austin, I love what you were saying there about the 10-minute walk and the, sometimes it's a prayerful walk because you're, thankful and grateful for a lot of the different things. It's funny. I tell people this all the time is like, that's kind of the way that I look at, some people do like morning prayer or evening prayer or whatever. I tend to be more that I have a conversation throughout the day with God. Like I just try to have an ongoing thing, and it might be something as easy as like, if I'm looking for something and I find it, I will find myself instinctively just saying, oh, thank you, God, like for that, like that just little thing of just finding the pen I was looking for or whatever, because it's just, I think the more you can do that throughout the course of your day, just being, whether you're thanking God, whether you're just, demonstrating that gratitude, and to Brandon's point there, because there is so many things. And I'm glad he brought that up about being present in the moment, because the other thing I really stole, I love this terminology used, because I've heard it talked about as a passion bucket. So you talked about on your social media as a fear bucket. And I think this is such a critical thing in working with athletes and people in general, clients in general, but it says we have a tendency, as Brandon was saying, that, to not be in that present moment. We find any reason to get outside of it. You were talking about the distractions while you're sitting in the cold plunge, but there's also things throughout the day. If we're doing any activity, we start to allow ourselves to get into what if thinking versus the what is currently going on. But we have a tendency to be, well, what if this happens, or what if that happens, or whatever. And it's so important, I think, and you, I know, are dealing with this a lot, and dealing with some of the players that you work with, is how do you teach them to fight that tendency to just be, to let the mind wander and start thinking about, what if I do strike out this time? I might not get another at bat today. What if I don't get the bunt down? I might not get another at bat today. What if I make an error? These are the things that athletes go through. So how do you guys, I'm sure, are dealing with that a lot. I mean, is there any tips or advice you have for some of those guys?
Yeah, there's a ton of that. I mean, that's the main piece right there. I love the faith and the fear buckets. I love the passion bucket or passion cup. A buddy of mine says, hey, like, let's fill up our happy cup throughout the day. I'm like, my buddy who lives in Charleston, right? It's so cool. Yeah. I need to go there and visit. I've heard it's incredible.
It's always awesome. See pictures.
But back on track, for us, a lot of the things that we'll teach them, it's really just changing the way that you speak to yourself, and Brandon, you said it best earlier. He said, having some grace for yourself. Johnny said, hey, I'm thankful that I found that pen that helps me write, which helps me turn in my assignment, which helps me get a good grade, which now I'm not in trouble because of my grades or whatever it could be something as simple and silly as that. Sure. And so just helping teach them how to speak to themselves in a different way, a more productive way. I like the thing of like productive versus destructive thoughts. It's like, I'm going to have destructive thoughts creeping in. We're all human beings. At some point, what ifs are going to pop in, but how do I reframe that? How do I handle that? How do I face that? And sometimes it's just writing it down in the journal to have it there. So when I turn back, I would guarantee if you look back at a journal 5 years ago, some same thoughts and things that I've thought 5 years ago are still happening today, right? I think the studies like 95% of the thoughts that we have each day are the same thoughts over and over and over. What if what if I don't make it? What if I don't get drafted? What if I this? And so helping them just find the groundedness in the present moment. And so it's so challenging, especially when we have so much stuff around us and access to a lot of really cool resources, more than we've ever had in our entire humanity. But at the end of the day, it's getting back to simplicity. Like when I'm with my family, I'm with my family. When I'm at practice, I'm at practice. When I'm at school, I'm at school. When I'm in the car, I'm in the car. When I'm eating breakfast, I'm crushing my breakfast and enjoying my breakfast. And so just teaching them how to speak to themselves in a more productive way. And I just feel like that's helped a lot, even just with that little thing of it's just your self-talk. But when they start to get it and they start to grasp it and then work on it, that's when you start to see some positive things. I think Jonathan India said something really good about, we posted on Instagram, something about just the process, right? And really, like, if you're results driven, you're always going to drive yourself into the ground. And as you guys know, the roller coaster of sports, especially baseball, and you can do everything right and fail, and you can do everything wrong and still succeed. And some people still don't understand that, but it's like, man, I did everything right here. I still did not get the result I wanted. And yes, I'm upset about that. It's okay. We deserve some time to be upset about it, but here's the things I did right. I swung at my pitch. I was on time with it. I stayed on that off speed. I hit it really hard to left field. That guy just made a jumping catch, and he did his job too. And so just finding more of those little wins throughout the day can be a very productive thing for anybody out there in the world.
I love where Brian Kane always talks about what if thinking. He says, if I gave you a pen and a piece of paper, what if thinking is limitless? Like you could literally go forever and ever thinking of all the scenarios that could happen. But you really, when you get that focus back into what is happening, is so key to your point there. It's a really, I think, I also agree that it's probably one of the bigger things that no matter what the sport, profession, or whatever, what I find, even if you just listen in conversation to people and you hear them bringing up things like, even, Brandon and I both, working in, like in the business world, there's so many times when you're talking to, coworkers where they just start into these what if scenarios. And I always resort back to Tyler Pazik and the, book, him and Greg Warburton, wrote, talk less, ask more, talk less. It's a great book, but one of the questions he says in there is he asks those athletes when they start coming up with, oh, I'm terrible, I'm this or that, is he, to your point about productive versus destructive thoughts, is he asks them a simple question of, is how you're talking to yourself right now, do you think that's helping you on down the road in your goal to be a better player? Or do you think it's hurting you? Like he gets them to start to understand how those thoughts are destructive, right? But it's through questioning instead of, because it's really easy for us to say those thoughts are not helping you, but it's another thing just to ask that person, do you think that's getting you closer to your goal or further away from your goal when you talk to yourself that way? And it's just such a good, I think, thing.
Well, and I think too, again, going back to if you're at a certain level, you've lost some perspective, right? Like, hey, if you're in college, if you're a college athlete, you're one of the top 4%,
right? Yeah,
to do it ever, right? I mean, like there's, and yes, you are going against. I mean, we all. If you were a dude in high school and you got to go to the next, you show up, everybody's a dude. You got to you got to find a way to be a dude again, right? To keep kind of going up. But like, there is perspective lost when you bring everybody of a similar talent level together, right? I remember the first time that I ever stepped on an NBA court, obviously not to play, but, and you realize, although, I don't know what you're laughing at. Don't make me bring it up, Cullen. Hey,
I know where this is going.
We're not going to go there. But my point is when you step on the court or when you're watching those guys play, they don't look that big because everybody out there is big. A genetic lottery winner. They are all 6'6" to 7'2", so they don't look that big. But when you, like, I'm 6'1", I step on the court and you're going, holy shit, cow! Yeah. Like these dudes are huge, and so perspective gets lost. And I think as an athlete, it gets lost, and it kind of falls in line with what you're talking about, John. Is just again have some perspective on where you are today. Be present. Understand that if you're at a certain level, you've won already. Like anything that you do above and beyond this is gravy. And maybe that helps alleviate some pressure if you have the right perspective.
Yes. Perspective. Question. I love that.
Yeah.
Hey, Austin, last question I have for you, because you've been more than kind with your time here. Gracious. But one of the things that when we had longtime Clemson baseball coach and Hall of Famer Jack Leggett on the show, I asked him a similar question, and I was thinking about this interview today, and I thought, this would be a good question for Austin is. And I'm going to cut out half of this, because when we had Coach Leggett on, we asked him, he's seeing now, because he's a grandfather who's helping out with some of his grandson's baseball teams and stuff. So he was seeing it at that young age of baseball, but then he still helping out some at the college level too with Team USA and different things like that. But I was asking him, I said, look, you have this lens that you are seeing and observing so much baseball through now because you see it at young ages. And I know yourself, as you're working through Major League University, you're seeing some young athletes, you're seeing some high school, some college, whatever. I'm not going to ask you where we're getting it wrong with baseball right now, but I would be curious, like, as you go through it, what is something you would like to see change about how the game is being done, whether it's being coached, whether it's through development? Like, what do you see that as someone who loves the game as much as we do, you kind of look back and say, gosh, I'd love to see us be a little bit better, more consistent in this?
It's a great question. There's a couple areas. I'm sure there's 1,000 areas. I think number one, like just alleviating some of that pressure and stress off of our kids and just putting the focus on development. You don't need to win at 8U, right? I look on Facebook. I'm in all these baseball Facebook groups, especially
World Series.
Oh my gosh. I mean, the other day, this guy, he's got 8 and under kid, I guess, and they're in Florida for the 8U PG World Series. I'm like, what are we doing, dude? You spent $10,000 to get your family there. I get it's a cool experience, but dude, wait 4 years and go to Cooperstown. Like, I don't know what else to do. So, I think just alleviating that stress and pressure, but, I would love to see us take more of the Japanese culture perspective. And what I mean by that is I worked with an athlete a little bit. I didn't really do the work with him, but we spoke together and I was like, dude, what do you do there? He plays college locally here at an NAIA school. He came from Japan. He grew up in Japan and knows all these languages and things. He's like, man, we literally practice like every day except for probably 4 or 5 days. And 75% of the practices, not saying that we need to practice every day, right? We probably should practice less, but 75% of the practices were on base running and basic fundamentals.
Wow.
The other 25% was maybe some batting practice and other things, but it was all fundamentals. And when you see it in the World Baseball Classic, both obviously Team USA is phenomenal and they're stacked and there's a lot of really good talented teams, especially in the Latin countries, and baseball is getting so much better in all these other countries. And I feel like we're kind of falling behind, even though technology is advanced. They're willing to do anything to get over here and to show us how good they are to provide for their family and get them off the island or wherever else they are.
Yeah.
For us, it's like, this is kind of a leisure and I get to go play a little bit, but they don't think of it as a get to. They think of it as a have to. A lot of our kids. And it's unfortunate due to that pressure and stress from family, coaches, and those things. And so if we took more of the Japanese approach, and I don't know all the intricate details, but hey, let's focus more on fundamentals, getting these kids as good as we possibly can, as well-rounded, and teaching them the game versus let's go play 70 tournaments this year and go every weekend to a new place. Yes, are there some benefits? Yeah, it's a cool experience. Myrtle Beach out by y'all. And there's a lot of cool places to go. But like, let's limit some of that and put more of the focus on developing as well as other sports. You guys are I can tell proponents of this, and I just feel like you learn so much through other sports, and some of the best athletes of all time didn't even play their sport until like their sophomore year of high school or freshman year of high school. There's another basketball player who's got a big contract for the Timberwolves. I'm drawing a blank on his name, but they were like, he's a Anthony Edwards, I think. Yeah, football player till high school. I'm like, what? That's incredible. The guy's still only like 20, 21 years old. And so he's got 4 or 5 years of playing the game of basketball. Now, like, I just think that will give us so much more juice to go out there and play and go do what we want to do. And then the other thing, and we're doing a good job of this, I think, in the baseball world, but everywhere we could do a better job is more collaboration, less like nitpicking and hate. Everybody's got their own way. There's thousands of drills. There's so many things, good, bad, and different. We all have our own beliefs. But to me, if we just foster an environment for these kids to have fun and keep that the main thing, and all the other stuff will come along with it. Now I want to go to practice. Mom, Dad, can you take me to that lesson? Mom, Dad, I want to go to these tournaments. Not, I got my 7th day of baseball in Phoenix in 120 degree weather. And it's Friday. I've got 2-a-days in my high school and I'm playing club ball and then I'm going on this other team. It's like, dude, take a break, go in the pool, go play video games, go be a kid. So long
that's
question.
Perfect. No, I knew you would nail that. I'm so glad that we had time to ask that one, because it is, you just hit it out of the park. I mean, every single one of those things is definitely something we could improve on, and we all love it and we all are after the same goal. But it's just, maybe let's just, kind of slow down at times and enjoy it a little bit more instead of it just being this rat race. And really, I couldn't agree more about focusing on that development, because it's I just think we've lost sight maybe of where the, it should be, because we're just, trying to do too much and get too much out of the player instead of really focusing on the player more, than we are as far as the other stuff. So, Austin, thank you so much. I mean, this, as I thought it would, and always does, the hour just flew by, but we really do appreciate you taking the time. Love what you guys are doing at Major League University. Big proponents of that, big fans of you, and also what you guys are doing through your social media content. Is the best way for people to get to you guys is through the website to be able to sign up, or do they fill out like a form or something? How's that work?
Yeah, website, social media. I'm checking all the inboxes, so hopefully we can get to those. And if you got questions, reach out, please. We love responding to questions and DMs and things like that. And it could be totally related to this or not. But best way through website or all social media platforms at Major League University. And then really working on growing our YouTube channel and starting to be a little more consistent. So This is kind of like that cold tub thing where I got to be better at being more consistent with this. And I see all these other people doing it, same deal. I'm like, why are we not doing more of this? So I kind of like a self gut punch to the face here of doing more. But yes, all those platforms are great. And we're thankful to be here. Thank you guys for having me. You guys are awesome. This was a lot of fun.
No, you were fantastic.
Absolutely. Really thanks, Austin.
Yeah. Thanks, fellas.
Want to provide feedback or stay up to date with the show? Visit our Instagram page at Mental Advantage Podcast, or you can send us an email at podcast@mentaladvantage.net. To have John Cullen work with you or your team, please write to him at john.cullen@mentaladvantage.net. Thanks for listening to today's episode.